Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli out here in the shop with a brand new episode for you, and I got a good one for you today. We're going to talk a little secret bait that I've had for a long time that in certain situations saves the day. Anytime the fishing's tough, anytime the water gets clear, anytime there's a post-frontal situation, this can be a player. But especially in the late summer and in the fall, when fish are really keyed in on bait fish, small bait fish, this can be a player. And I've kept this one under wraps for a long time. And even a few times that it's leaked out, the secret has gotten out, I don't think people ever took it seriously. They almost laughed at me on this one. But don't laugh, because this is a secret little deal when things get tough. And before I talk about the bait and the presentation, I want to talk about this box a little bit. This is a box that I have carried in my boat for over 20 years. It never leaves my boat. You may have heard me talk about it before. This is a box, and I call it the panic box. And I call it the panic box because when things get tough, when everything else is failing, I keep it in my boat because I remember, oh yeah, this is my panic box. And in this panic box, you're going to see a lot of different smaller, more finesse style baits. You're going to see little grubs. You're going to see small jerk baits. You're going to see hair jigs, little tubes, spoons. But in my panic box, you're going to see a lot of this lure right here. And this is what I'm here to talk to you about today. You ready? It's an inline spinner. The good old inline spinner. And now you know why people didn't take it seriously. You know, an inline spinner, for a lot of anglers, it's not really a hardcore bass lure, right? It's great for trout. It's great for panfish. It's good for multi-species. Maybe it's a great lure for rivers or streams. But listen, don't laugh at this. The good old inline spinner has saved the day for me so many times, especially when the fishing gets tough. You know, some of the scenarios where I would throw this would be a cold front situation. If you're catching them on a full-size spinnerbait or a full-size swim bait before the cold front, they stop biting that big spinnerbait. That's a scenario where an inline spinner works. Heavy fishing pressure. You get out there and everybody in this area you're fishing, they're all throwing a chatterbait. Everybody's throwing a chatterbait. All of a sudden, you can't get a bite. You break out the inline spinner. You start catching those fish. Last but not least, and this is really the scenario that falls into summertime, late summer, and especially fall fishing, is when the fish, when the bass get keyed in on smaller bait fish, right? That big spinnerbait that you've been throwing, that big crankbait that you've been throwing, that big swim bait, they stop working because these bass now are feeding on small, young of the year forage, little shiners, little shad, little minnows. That's really when this could kick in. Clear water, stained water, even dirty water, all options for an inline spinner. I'm done keeping this one a secret. I'm ready to talk to you about it. The main thing I want to talk to you about with the spinner is picking the right spinner, and I want to talk about color and blade style, okay? Just like you would pick other lures, whether it's a crankbait or a spinnerbait or a soft plastic, you're going to pick an inline spinner based on those same considerations. And the number one factor, you know I've said it a million times, match the hatch. Forage match. So when I look at my spinner colors, I'm really paying attention to the color of that body and the color of the blade. And I want to mimic that color to the forage that I'm fishing. There's a white with a silver blade. Great imitation of a shad or a shiner or a minnow. Look at this one. Brown and gold. Looks more like a bluegill or a dace, a fathead, something like that. Here's one with a black blade when your forage is darker. An orange blade for yellow perch. A gold blade. You know, always thinking about forage when you're picking your spinner color, right? Number one consideration. The next thing on picking the right spinner is blade style. Just like a spinnerbait, right? These inlines come with a different styles of blades. And I carry all three with me, okay? We've got the willow style blade, very long, elongated, right? The willow style blade. I carry spinners that have an Indiana style blade. It's not as long as a willow. It's a little fatter, right? It's a hybrid blade. And I also carry spinners, inline spinners that have those rounded, more Colorado style blades on them, okay? And just like I pick a blade in my spinnerbait fishing, I'm going to do the same thing with my spinners. Here's the general rule of thumb for you, okay? Clearer water, cleaner water, I want more flash in my inline spinner. So I'm going to pick a willow style. Willow's that elongated, thin blade, less vibration, more flash. This is the perfect inline spinner for clean to crystal clear water. Stained water, right? The water's not crystal clear, but the water's not dirty. It's not muddy. Stained water. I like that Indiana style blade. Look at that Indiana style blade. It's not quite a willow. It's not quite a Colorado. I love that in-between style blade. This one has flash, but a little less flash. And it's got way more vibration to it because it's more cupped. Indiana blade's more cupped. So a little more vibration. Last but not least, fishing an inline spinner in super stained to dirty, muddy water. This is a sleeper. Nobody does it. I use a Colorado blade inline spinner. And that blade has the least amount of flash, but it's got a very deep cup on it. Look at it. Look at it. It almost looks like the cup to a bottom of a spoon. And that Colorado shaped blade has a lot of vibration, even on an inline spinner. Great for dirtier water, low light, you know, almost dark fishing conditions. That's the best one. Okay, so talk to you about color, talk to you about blade selection. On size, I carry a lot of different size inline spinners with me. I've got boxes dedicated to just inlines. Everything from these real little 16th ounce spinners, real light ones, all the way up to big ones that weigh a 1/4 ounce, even some that weigh more, right? Up to 3/8 of an ounce. My general rule of thumb is match the size of that bait, that forage match. So size and profile is the #1 selection. Most of the spinners that I throw, my inlines, in my panic box are a 1/16 to about a 3/16 of an ounce. But that one right there, that 3/16 or this 1/8, there's an 1/8, are my two absolute favorite sizes, an 1/8 and a 3/16. And the beauty of these baits is I throw them on, you ready for this? A spinning rod. I throw them on a spinning rod. And the reason I love these inlines, especially these two sizes, the 1/8 and 3/16, even down to the 16th ounce, is I can make a super, super long cast. So spinning rod, I like something that's 7.2 to 7.6, something that has a medium action to it. Love that because just like a spinnerbait, when I'm fishing this inline, I want that fish to get it in his mouth, and I want a little delay in that rod. I want a little softness to it. So a medium tip is perfect for hooking and landing those fish. On line choice, my line choice has changed over the years. I used to throw these tied to straight mono or fluorocarbon. But really, because these baits are so light and I need to make a long cast, I love braid to an extremely long fluorocarbon leader. That's my normal setup on my spinning rod when I'm throwing these inline spinners. So I like, 8 or 10 pound braid to a 6 or 8 pound fluorocarbon leader, but a really long leader. I'm talking about 20 to 40 feet long of fluorocarbon. The other nice thing about that is after a day of fishing, you can just replace that leader. If your line gets twisted up, you can replace it. The other thing I do is I'll add a small ball bearing snap swivel to this to help eliminate a little bit of that line twist, okay? All right, last but not least, letting the cat out of the bag, I want to talk to you about the different ways that I fish an inline spinner. And you can really relate it to a spinnerbait. And I'm going to fish an inline spinner that same 3 ways that I fish a spinnerbait, okay? Number 1 way that I'm going to fish an inline spinner, and this one is great for clear to ultra clear water. This one's also great when the fish are schooling. Remember we talked about when they stop eating a full-size spinnerbait, they're schooling, the bait's little, you throw on this. My first technique that I'm going to use for inline spinners is called burning an inline spinner. And that means making a long cast and reeling this thing as fast as you can reel it without the spinner blowing out of the surface, right? So you're keeping it high, you're reeling it flat fast in really clean water. When fish are schooling on little bait, they see that thing, blade flashing. I like the willow blade for that, right? When I'm burning it, I like flash, not as much vibration. Also, the willow blade doesn't have as much lift as a Colorado or Indiana. So willow blade, burning it, the little bit bigger sizes, the 1/8, the 3/16, even the 1/4 are great for burning because it helps keep it in the water, right? It doesn't want to lift as much. Burning it, reeling it as fast as you can reel it is my number 1 way to fish an inline spinner. The one thing I do though is as I reel it in fast, I'll always throw in a pause or a jerk just to get that blade to change direction for a second, to flash a little different. So I don't just burn it straight back. I'll burn it, throw in a little jerk. Burn it, throw in a pause, keep burning it, okay? So burning, clear, ultra clear water schooling fish, number 1 technique. The next one is what I would call the steady retrieve. But just like the pause and the jerk that I did with the burning technique, my medium or steady retrieve is going to have pauses in it. And for that one, I really, really, really like the Indiana style blade spinners. This particular one right here is called a Panther Martin. I love this one for this. And my medium or steady retrieve is so effective for catching fish that are suspended and in the middle of the water column. A lot of times late summer, in the fall, fish will suspend because guess what? The forage that they're feeding on is suspended. So that medium slow retrieve is real key. And that's about the pace right there. A lot of times I'll count it down and I'll just begin that medium slow retrieve. A lot like a spy bait, if you were fishing a spy bait. It's that very methodical retrieve. But every once in a while, listen to me, I throw in a pause. And when I throw in that pause, I actually stop it and I bow to the bait a little bit, and then I start my retrieve back again. So that thing's coming steady through the water. That Indiana style blade is a little cupped, so there's a little vibration, a little flash. And when I stop and lean toward the bait, and then pick it back up. Imagine what this thing's doing. It's coming through steady, right through the middle of the water column, just where those fish are suspended. Then all of a sudden, it falls a little. And as it falls, that Indiana blade is so good at helicoptering down, but then you pick it back up and the blade starts spinning again. And a lot of bites will come either on that initial drop or just as you pick it back up, okay? So retrieve number 2, great for suspended fish, great for clean, too muddy water, but especially stained water, and great with an Indiana style blade is a medium or steady retrieve with pauses or breaks thrown in there. Last but not least, talking about my inline spinner selection is the good old Colorado spinnerbait. And I throw a lot of that style blade. The Blue Fox, I love the Blue Fox. I also love the Meps for this one. And that Colorado blade, you can see it, it's a rounder, more oval, more cup style blade. This is the one I use for my 3rd reeling technique on inline spinner. And it's the slow roll technique. And all that means, just like a spinnerbait, is I'm keeping this lower toward the bottom. For this one, I like the little heavier inline spinners, the 8s, 3/16, the quarters, even up to 3/8 sometimes when I'm fishing real deep water. And on the slow roll technique, I'm letting the spinner get to the bottom before I start my retrieve. That's the most critical thing on this, is letting it get to the bottom. So I make that long cast, I keep my bail open, I watch the spinner as it falls, watching the line sink, 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 boom. The line bellows out, the line stops. That means you hit the bottom. Every once in a while, one will hit it on the fall, so be a line watcher. But once that spinner hits the bottom, I click over and watch my retrieve speed on this one. This is called the slow roll. Ready? Barely retrieving it. Look at it. Just barely turning that reel handle. Barely turning it. Just like the other two, just like burning, just like my medium retrieve. Every once in a while, I stop. And when I stop, I let the spinner fall all the way till it hits the bottom again. And by nature, that Colorado blade wants to lift. So imagine what that spinner's doing. It hits the bottom on the initial fall. You're slow rolling it. It's gently lifting off the bottom. You throw in a pause, let it fall all the way back down. It helicopters on the way down. That Colorado blade creating vibration, boom, hits the bottom. You start again. Perfect invitation to a little bait fish that's struggling, that's dying, that's trying to not get eaten, lifting and falling. The slow roll retrieve with the inline spinner. Man, this was a tough one for me to give up. And I know a lot of you are saying there's no way, but listen to me. Buy a couple inlines. Throw them in a little box. Throw them in a bag in your boat, in your kayak, in your backpack. And when things get tough, when they're feeding on bait and they won't hit anything else, try an inline spinner. Remember the tips on color, blade style. Remember those 3 retrieve techniques. And when nothing else is working, the good old inline will save the day. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of In the Shop. Stop real quick for a second. If you like this stuff, subscribe. Hit the button right there. Push that button that says subscribe. Subscribe to this channel. We've got great content coming every week. New content coming right to you. If you're already subscribed, do me a favor. Tell your fishing friend to subscribe to Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. They're going to love the content as well. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't sleep on the old inline spinner. It's going to save the day.